Welcome to the Pacesetter Pod, where we explore and reveal the perspectives, insights, and approaches to deliver great results and growth in your agribusiness through better execution. Here's your host, the Integration Pacesetter, Joe Mosier.
Hello, Pacesetters of Agribusiness, and welcome to another episode of the Pacesetter Pod. I'm your host, Joe Mosier, and thank you, as always, for choosing to spend your time with us today. I want to tell you guys a story today about Jim. Jim is a client of ours that we've been working with to help them identify efficiencies in some of their internal processes and some of the opportunities in their costs to both help amplify but also sustain some of the growth that they've seen over the last couple of years. Now, what I can tell you about Jim is that he's not a conventional client, but it's a very interesting case study, which is why I want to talk about it a little bit here today. What Jim's organization does is they procure a variety of goods, let's call them component parts, that all have related use. They handle all the complicated importation challenges, paperwork, etc. They do all the quality assurance work required for this type of process. They iron out all the wrinkles to ensure steady availability of sometimes scarce resources. And then they ultimately resell these as packaged goods or bundled products at a margin that will support Jim's organization, certainly, but provides a significant cost advantage over the next best alternatives. So in effect, they are taking what would largely be seen as commodity products, providing a differentiated supply and quality assurance sort of service, if you will, and then offering that at a material discount to the market. And the model has completely taken off, which is why we've been brought in, because the growth has been such that it's really applying a lot of pressure to different aspects of their business. And as you know, when growth, in volume and customers and revenue, when it's all up and to the right, growth exposes all sorts of weaknesses, right? It could be capital constraints that are going to mute future growth. It could be that you're starting to see diminished service quality, response time to customer issues, whatever it might be. But also, as you might expect, space and physical capacity also eventually become a bottleneck. So Jim's organization, what they do is they operate leased commercial warehouse space. And over time, they have steadily and moved into progressively larger and larger facilities. It's a pretty classic example, right? They remove the bottleneck of physical space. They relieve that. They then can put their focus on other bottlenecks that are naturally going to emerge. They eventually grow through those bottlenecks until, voila, physical space suddenly becomes a bottleneck again. This is obvious. It's not a novel concept in agribusiness or even business more generally. But it's Jim's mindset and the clarity of his thinking that really gave me pause. We were talking about this not too long ago, and I was sort of nibbling around the edges of what I was observing around how they're able to just kind of steadily move from one space to the next, and it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. And he said, we work to our constraints, not until them. So I said, Jim, what do you mean? I don't know that I fully understand that. And he said it's a mindset. He said that you're amid a growing organization, and the bottlenecks are going to be infinite. And you're in this game of experiencing a bottleneck, then identifying it, and then resolving it, at which point then you operate freely until you experience it again. And I said, yeah, that's obvious, but I still don't understand what you mean to your constraints and not until them. And he said, well, maybe that's not the best way of saying it, but what I mean is, what if you design your work and your processes in such a way that you're not waiting for the trigger of experiencing a bottleneck in the process? What if we hold the fact that a bottleneck is coming, we hold it as a known constraint, not yet materialized, but eventually going to manifest? How would that impact the way that we think? How would that impact the way we plan, the way we stage, the way we grow? And it's really had me thinking about how we interact with our internal constraints within agribusiness. Things like waiting for a problem versus anticipating and expecting one. And so in this context, specifically, in Jim's organization, it's a very labor-intensive physical operation. There's no automation. There's no inventory location or tracking scans. There's no dynamic modeling of inventory on site, in process, finished, or sellable. They're just a scrappy, hands-on operation. And yet in a very deliberate and capital-efficient way, they're steadily moving into progressively larger facilities, which, to be fair, is a good proxy for the growth of their organization. The more space they need, the better the business is going. They're moving into these progressively larger facilities without any discernible disruption to their procurement or processing or storage or fulfillment processes. And it's just been fascinating to me. So I had to ask him, how do you maintain this mindset of working to your physical space constraints and not until them? For me, it was, how has this not become a major point of friction for your employees, right? You get used to a space, you're working in it, things are obviously going well, and then suddenly you're up and moving somewhere else. How's that not been an issue for your suppliers and where they have to dispatch product to, or for your customers even, potentially? And he shared that there's 3 things that he evangelizes within his organization every day. And that's what I would like to share with you today.
Poorly executed mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. They can set your company back years. To defend your firm's position in the marketplace, you need access to the leading practices that unlock the greater potential of your people, processes, and systems. If you are undertaking a company transformation or pursuing an acquisition as a vehicle to grow, set up a call with Joe by visiting www.moshercg.com.
The first thing that Jim said was pretty straightforward. He said, optimize for what you have, which, as an aside, is again why we have come to work with this organization and with Jim to help them optimize for what they currently have, identify some of the waste in their systems. But in the context of physical space, he said, when they move into a new space, despite that extra room being a very real relief to everyone in the organization, they try to treat it as if it's already too small. And they try to think about, how can we remove waste to free up space? Lots of different directions this can go, but what is the best bay for receiving? What's the best location for shipping? How is this going to look for internal handling processes? What's the logistics for vehicles to get in and out of our facility? What's the best way for us to move materials and eventually finished goods through the process from receipt to staging, packaging, palletizing, and shipment? What's the optimal location and sizing and specs on the racking that we'll need when we're operating at 100% capacity in here? They think about what's the best location in the facility in terms of climate control, because again, the people are doing physical labor. Are the decisions that they're making about receiving and shipping going to push production into an optimal location for efficiency, but may expose all their people to very harsh weather or limit their ability to keep it cool and ventilated in warm months? So they take a really comprehensive look at it. And it's exciting stuff, but it's hard to pull off, because you have to treat your processes like they're already at capacity, even when they aren't. And that's a hard thing to replicate in the abstract. But you know why they do this? For Jim, he says because this helps them, they predefine what is the projected nominal or perhaps the maximum put through of that facility. They know that way before they even reach it. And now that they know it, they can, well in advance of the constraint, start to anticipate when they're going to experience it. So optimize for what you have, because that's going to set the baseline for where you can go. The second thing Jim says that he really preaches to the team is, we're going to enjoy the elbow room, guys, with this new facility, but we're going to stay disciplined despite the slack. And this is really, for me, it's about creating both a positive culture and running good process. So when Jim's organization has made these moves into new spaces in the past and set things up as we discussed, they, of course, are running fairly smoothly. Not perfect. Every organization has opportunities, but they're running pretty well. There's challenges here and there, but they let the team enjoy the opportunity to stretch out and enjoy all this elbow room, if you will. That's the culture aspect. Let the team enjoy the win. You've got more space than you had. You should enjoy it. But now let's figure out, how do we make sure we can enjoy this for as long as possible? And that's all about staying true to their process. Slack in the system in terms of more capacity than demand, they recognize that as a temporary condition. If they're doing their work well, if the business is growing, if the market continues to validate that what they do is a need, then they should fully expect that this brand new warehouse with all this extra space is eventually going to barely meet and then eventually fall short of the demands. And so they really try to stay true to their process, because they understand the more you drift from your standard process, the more temporary that slack is going to be, the shorter the shelf life of that elbow room that they're enjoying. So the idea for them is to know that the slack is not infinite. Eventually, again, space will return as your primary bottleneck. And what they're working to do is, of course, run good process, but they're also working to preserve that slack for as long as possible. So it's almost up to the team. You enjoying this additional space that we have? We're not climbing all over each other. We're not starting to bump into each other. We're not starting to have problems with forklift traffic and people interactions and inventory storage. It's up to us. The more efficient that we can be, the longer we can preserve this sense of space and room that we have. It's a tough balancing act to pull off for sure, and Jim would be the first to admit that, but it's been a huge contributor to their success. And the last thing that Jim shared with me is, finally, keep your eyes on what's coming. So at this point, again, we'll recap briefly. They've ensured that the team, the processes, and the flows all optimized for what's available. They know what their upper limits are. They're enjoying that luxury of slack, but they're remaining true to the process to preserve that luxury for as long as possible. What's interesting here is those same processes that told them what the theoretical limit is helps them understand when they should start to expect that constraint to reemerge. So they measure how they're doing. And this is where it all comes together in the working to your constraints, not until them. They're watching how performance, production, and volume are steadily utilizing more and more of that projected nominal capacity. And as they begin to close in on that upper limit, they begin the process again of revisiting facility needs, of evaluating what future demand will look like, when that demand will come to them, what this means for the current space, and when should they start actually looking to move into a larger space. And when they move into that larger space, what might be some of the efficiency opportunities they're looking to solve for when they have this rare opportunity of recreating the space where the work gets done. It tells them not just what is needed, but also tells them when to act. And that's what becomes most impactful, is that they are acting before the constraints have fully manifest themselves. I'll admit none of this is rocket science, but also none of it is very easy. But I have to say it's been really, really fun and just fascinating to watch it play out in front of me in the real world. So to recap, working to your constraints, not until them, requires 3 things. Optimize for what you have, stay disciplined despite the slack, and monitor and act on the constraint before it bears down on you. Replicating this in your agribusiness, whether that's, we've invested in a larger fleet of tender trucks, and you're looking to optimize how you dispatch those trucks to the field to serve the acres that you cover. Maybe it's your processes around batching specialty feed. Maybe it's you're looking to diversify your seed product lines because you're investing in a broader complex of contract growers. Whatever it is, this is a great way to start thinking about how to fix issues without the pain of experiencing them. And who wouldn't like that? There's an old adage that I'll close with here today, that there's no money in selling vitamins, but you can make a fortune selling aspirin. That's probably true. I think we're all generally a lot better at responding to an ailment than preventing one, but I think that's a lousy excuse not to try. So thank you as always for tuning in today. I hope this was relevant and useful for you. Please subscribe to the Pacesetter Pod on your podcast player. If you haven't done so already, please leave us a review and tell us how we're doing. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can always connect with me, Joe Mosier, on LinkedIn, or set up a call directly by visiting Mosier Consulting Group online at mosiercg.com. I would love to hear from you. Execute well, and we look forward to having you join us again right here on the Pacesetter Pod.
This is the podcastfactory.com.